Hello all and welcome to episode 80 of the 3-for-1 Sky Fantasy Football podcast by fantasyfootballhub.co.uk in the midst of a long and sunny international break. Paul, you're looking very brown. Have you been out in the sun?
I was up in the Pitlock yesterday, so catch some rays up there. Lovely, a few pints outdoors.
Lovely stuff. It's been a fabulous break, haven't it? Have you enjoyed the break, or are you kind of mad to have the football back?
No, I've enjoyed the break, and I'm off to watch Scotland play in Austria tomorrow. So.
Oh well, they'll ruin it for you, mate.
It's always been about the trip to Scotland as opposed to the football, so it's all good.
Indeed. My name is Fergi, and I'm joined as usual by my co-host Paul McAnulty. Paul, how was your Sky weekend just before we wrapped up for the international break?
Yeah, I had a good Sky week in that I didn't move too much, but didn't use any transfers, didn't rush based on the mad panic on the Friday night when the Wolves Leeds team was revealed and there was no Rafinha and no Kilman. I managed to hold off there, which I think was the right decision. And I had the Arsenal coverage in Saka and Gabriel on the Saturday. So overall, I had quite a good week, I think.
Nice, yeah. Ranked 49th still. I was 88th. Yep. Last time we spoke, and I had designs of maybe winning the whole thing, back down to earth with a bump, back down to 149th, and somehow I've ended up with Chris Wood in my team. It's smacks of that. Was the new smacks of a Callum Wilson, wasn't it? But I still think it's an okay move. Didn't have a captaincy for the Thursday. He now plays twice, whereas everyone else plays once. So.
And 3 times, really, if you do captain him against Wolves as well. So.
Yeah, I'll get to the lineups. I was worried about Kilman. I think if Kilman had have played all the games and he was nailed on, I may not have done it. But I thought, with the fact that they had a single game day against Everton, the fact that Kilman is just isn't nailed anymore, I thought it may be worth it. So it obviously didn't work out on the night, but they played Spurs on the weekend, who are hardly the best at the back. And then that game before, I'll move them on then. I did make another bit of a last gasp move as well. I took out Trent. Obviously, we had the news he was injured. And obviously, because they play first on Saturday and then they play Man City as well, I thought it was worth a gamble. I'd be surprised if he played on Saturday. If he does. And home to Watford's a plum game, right? But I thought it worth the risk. I took him out for Kulusevski, who had the extra game just for the break. I think they had West Ham, didn't they? Obviously didn't do anything in that game, but I think he's a really good bet for the rest of the season. Nailed on in a front three for a team scoring lots of goals.
If you're holding him all the way, if the plan is to hold him all the way to the end of the season, then I don't think it's necessarily a bad move. It's just part of a restructured daisy chain. Assuming that you go back to Trent, but I guess then you got the choice of VVD, or if you're looking for someone in that price point anyway.
You can go to Matip. We'll talk more kind of about this later, but there's a bit of a potential bit of a moving day on Sunday the 10th of April, where a lot of popular players for like Leeds and Villa, their fixtures really tail off, and there's a new breed of team like Leicester's and Chelsea's and others as well. So we'll touch on that later around kind of how I'm thinking about restructuring my team. But yeah, my designs of winning it are now firmly in the bin. I took out Cancelo. I risked it a couple of weeks ago. Remember when people took him out for Rudiger and things?
Yep.
So that captaincy cost me.
That's when he had COVID. As well.
That's right? It. And then when I captained Coutinho over Saka as well last week, which was I fancied him for captain. I didn't do it to be different. I honestly thought that he'd have a good game, and as it worked out, Saka obviously did well for owners. But there we are. So looking forward to the final run-in now, I think. It's been a long old season. These COVID rearrangements are very hard to keep on top of, aren't they? For any new watchers and listeners, you are very welcome. If you haven't subscribed to us yet, please press the subscribe button in the bottom right-hand corner of the screen and set the alerts so you don't miss our podcasts and live streams. Also, please press the like button if you enjoy our content. So this evening, we're going to have a look at the new top 1K ownership, which changed around quite a fair bit in the last fortnight or so, and look at the key points from the last game week. We will look at transfers remaining and preview next weekend's fixtures. Paul then wants to share the love by sharing what he gets from the various Sky podcasts on the market before we take on some Twitter questions and look at the updated mini leagues. Good evening, everyone in the chat. Absolutely fantastic to be back. Mark Daniels is here. Liam Dorian. Brownie says, evening, Fergi and Paul. To everyone listening, he's ranked 88th. Second team, 117th. Great stuff. Martin Beasley says evening. Steve Cheek is in as well, as is Stephen Murray Bruce. A quiet lobby this evening, but unsurprising with the weather and international football causing everyone to have a bit of a hiatus, I think, from Premier League.
And as Dan pointed out, dancing on ice finals on.
Dancing on ice final. I mean, priorities. I've actually got it on my other screen over here, Paul. So I'm trying to concentrate on this, but dancing on ice will take precedent. Bob Tomlinson is also in. Says, I'm a bit disappointed to hear Fergie say he's out of the race. Consider his rank; it looks amazing. Yeah, 149. I think if I was in the top 100, I may have had a bit of a shunt, a bit of a go.
It's 170 points to first.
That is not good with only 10 or 11 transfers left. I don't think it's enough, but. Anyway, we move, as they say. So we have the top 1K ownership up now on the screen, and Harry Kane. I think it's the first time that Salah and Cancelo have been off the top for I'm guessing most of the season. Yeah. But Kane up to 93.6, Salah down to 93.1, Cancelo 78.4, Saka massive ownership now 64.3. Trent has gone down 57.6. So some other people, probably aside from me, took a gamble on Trent's injury. Jacob Ramsey, who would have thought it? 52.2% owned. Absolutely incredible. Laporte 51 before we get down into the 40s. What are your takes of the ownership swings, Paul, in the last fortnight?
Yeah, so the 5 players that stood out to me, first of all, Saka up to 64.3%. I think that a lot of people would have made the move on the Saturday against Aston Villa, make use of the extra game that they had, and perhaps move off James Ward-Prowse or Rafinha, drop down a bit more as well. So I think that would have been a common move. So James Ward-Prowse down to 21.6% is kind of the second one out of the 5 that I wanted to highlight as well. So you can see a lot of people went off on there. And I think after the Leeds game, which is the first game after an international break, I think we'll see even more movement off him as well. Then Trent down to 57.6%. I'd seen quite a few people on Twitter had made the move over to Son. So that
good move.
So the increase from kind of 11% to 21.8%. Perhaps move in formation to a 4-3-3 for a while, and then you can just reverse that move back after you make the most of Spurs' fixtures. And I think after Watford, Liverpool's got Man City, Man United, and then don't play Everton until the Sunday. So you can make the most of that kind of 5-for-3 with Spurs having the extra fixtures and all against decent teams as well, or decent looking fixtures rather. And then Jacob Ramsey up to 52.2%. I think there's a question about this later on about how to get to the 5 premium defenders. We have spoken about this before, but I think Jacob Ramsey's the key. And to me, it doesn't matter how many games Villa play over that shorter period of time. And I know they're likely to blank in a couple of game weeks' time, and then they've got 2 rearranged fixtures to play after that. I don't necessarily think making a move now or gaining 1 fixture now is particularly bad if you're wanting to get rid of somebody, to kind of open up that move later down the line, because you're saving a transfer there.
Yeah, interesting, because obviously Villa, Wolves and Leeds, who have some very popular players, Rafinha, Kilman, Sarr, Coutinho, Ramsey, etc., all blank in, I think it's FPL Game Week 33, which will be Sky Game Week 36, I think it is. Yeah, it's very interesting, because how I'm thinking of navigating through that is personally to take those players out and try and transition and maximize the extra games, because some teams like Leicester, for example, will have like a 4-for-1 over some of these teams, and then so I think I've got 10 transfers left. So I think I'm probably going to use 3 or 4 in the next couple of weeks to transition my team to be able to get to maybe kind of end of April, and then use the remaining wherever I'll have left, potentially let's just say 4 for adding an injury in there to just sort out my team for the kind of run in then. But I know it's very different to what others doing, but it's an interesting time with all these rearrangements. It's I don't know about you, Paul. I struggle to get my my head around it at times. It just seems ever moving, ever changing. There's still unknowns as well, right? There could still be doubles added in the next 2 weeks, 3 weeks. There'll definitely be some added after. How are you kind of managing getting your head around all the all the fixtures and potentials and stuff?
Just not panicking on transfers. I think if news comes in late, so say you've got a planned move in mind, and the starting 11 comes out, and the player that you're choosing to come in isn't playing, then perhaps just taking a pause back and thinking, can I save the transfer and perhaps use it further down the line, so that when there is some surprise announcements, I think Planet FPL's talked quite a bit about Villa potentially getting, even though they're blank in Sky Gameweek 36, Sky Gameweek 37, there's perhaps a double in there. So that could be I've not held Coutinho all season, so that could be my entry point into Coutinho there, making most of the extra games. So I just think being a bit coy. I wouldn't say harness your transfers. If the planned move is still there, then go ahead and make it. But perhaps if things change, then not using a transfer is as valuable as using one in these situations.
Yep, can't argue with that, Paul. Let's take a quick look at the average remaining transfers. So this was posted on I think it was the day before the last Sky scoring weekend, and the top 10 average is now 7.6. Still think is fairly high. There's probably a couple in there which are really, really low, and a couple which are higher. The top 100, 9.6. Which you would guess may have gone down a little bit after a little bit of action on the weekend.
I think so. I think there was 3 entry points or 3 transfer points after that. That was after the Newcastle Everton game on the Thursday night, so it was before the Wolves Leeds game, and then with the lineups perhaps surprising people on the Wolves Leeds game. So, as I said before, the 2 highly on players, Coleman and Rafinha, both not starting. Ruben Neves' ownership jumped up to 12.6%. There was a bit of love for other defensive assets from Wolves. So Cody went up to 8.8%, Saiss went up to 4.4%, and Jose Sa got some more admirers. He's in the top 20 of the 1K ownership, up to 22.3% as well. So would have been some movement there. Saka, we've already talked about him, went up to 64.3%. Gabriel got some new admirers as well. He went up slightly. And then on the Sunday, you had Kulusevski, Son, those that didn't already have Kane, brought in Kane as well. So again, there was a few jumps there. So and Leicester assets as well. Harvey Barnes and James Maddison got a few new admirers there as well. So definitely. I wouldn't be surprised if that was down towards kind of 8.5-ish now, I think.
Yeah, agree. Interestingly, you mentioned about the Leeds and Wolves game. Just before we went live, we were chatting about how we spent our time, and that was Gold Cup day, wasn't it, for Cheltenham? And I remember I was out all day for that one, and I was absolutely steaming. I just remember kind of looking at my phone, seeing that Ivan was playing, and I'm kind of glad that I was out and had a drink, because when you do that, it doesn't seem to matter, does it? Sort of thing. It's just like, they're both out. They're both shit. Let's just kind of leave them. Whereas if it was, if say Liverpool were playing, for example, or Man City, and I only had Cancelo, and it's like, if I had to put some serious thought, it would have been stuff. So I was quite glad. Just definitely let that one go. Top 1,000 have got 10.6 transfers, and top 5,000 have got 9.2. Let's have a look then at this weekend's fixtures, and we start off with 12:30 Liverpool and Watford. Salah, you would guess, would probably be the highest owned captain, assuming he's fit. We get to see the lineups, which is fantastic news for this one. Can't see Trent playing, but I gotta be honest, you never know, do I suppose? We'll hear stuff off, in the presses on that one. Wolves and Villa at 3:00, Leeds, Southampton, Chelsea, Brentford, Burnley, Man City, Brighton, Norwich, Man United, and Leicester. Man United have got a decent run now, Paul, a decent attacking run. I think I'd probably wouldn't pick any of their defenders. Are you tempted at all by maybe Ronaldo or maybe Sancho or anyone else?
I've got so many plans. I've not actually got that many plans to captain Salah outside of that first Saturday, but I've got plans to captain Kane thereafter, and I don't really want to dismantle my team to get the 3 premiums up front, so I doubt very much that I'll be doing anything with the Man United attacking assets. I'm unlikely to captain any of them on any of the days as well, I think.
They got nice.
It certainly could be a nice differential. See if Salah didn't start against Watford for whatever reason. I'm not speculating that he won't. If I was chasing, perhaps moving him on to Ronaldo and then running with Ronaldo, perhaps until the game where Leicester play Everton and bringing Salah back there, could be an alternative move to the masses. But I just don't fancy it myself.
Their fixtures are very good. So home to Leicester, as we know, Leicester have been incredibly dodgy at the back. They then got Everton, and then they've got Norwich. I do think maybe if that first game was on the Sunday, or as you say, if Salah doesn't play, the only game that Liverpool have got in that period then is Man City. Is Man City. So that 3-for-1 there is, that potential 3-for-1 looks really, really good there. It might be, if Salah doesn't play, it may be what I'm tempted with, like I say, just to maybe try and go a bit different potentially, because they are very good fixtures.
I think there's a good opportunity coming up to rotate premium defenders and getting multiple 3 for zeros by hopping off one, daisy chain on, move another one into somewhere else. And I think that's the way that I'm going to go. I've still got quite a bit above the average in transfer count, and there will be a few single captaincy days, so I'm going to make that move from Ramsdale to Pope. But I think that I'm going to use the remainder of my transfers. I've got Jacob Ramsey in now as well, which frees me up to go to the 5-3-2 and frees up the money to go big at the back again. And I think that's going to be my ploy, is to kind of rotate. There will be 3-for-nothings coming up on the big teams, and then just manoeuvre those around.
It's hard to argue with that. Also, we had a question in which we may as well kind of touch on now. Around Liverpool and Man City, obviously going toe for toe for the title. Neither are going to give an inch, right? And players maybe like Laporte and Matip, players like that who potentially, may have been rotated. Even some of the bigger guns may have been rotated for Champions League and things, but they are going to play their best team, aren't they? Every single game, they can't afford to drop a point. So I do think that strategy ball is good, and I think historically in the Premier League as well, that when it gets kind of tight, teams like City, Liverpool, etc., perfectly happy just going like for 1-0 wins and 2-0 wins, and those right down the bottom just to playing for 0-0s and 1-0 wins, aren't they? So get the feeling we're going to see a lot more clean sheets, and then the teams in the middle kind of go on the beach, right? So they're not kind of scrapping for every point. So I think we'll see a few clean sheets, and I think that I think going 5 at the back is the way to go. Definitely. I'm not sure on. No, he is a good buy, Ramsey. I'm only saying I'm not sure because I haven't got him.
I genuinely wouldn't be too upset if he picked up 2 points in every game until the end of the season.
Yeah. He's just doing a job, and he's doing a job.
Yeah. And he'll pick up, and he'll average more than that anyway. With the way he picks up tackle bonus and the odd attack and return as well.
Cool. Sunday the 3rd of April, West Ham versus Everton, Spurs and Newcastle. You would guess Kane probably the overwhelming captain, Son for those who are chasing maybe.
And I wouldn't let Son's haul and perceived missing of the haul. Well, it's not perceived because you did miss out on a haul, but I wouldn't let that put you off even if Trent did or didn't play against Watford.
Yeah.
I wouldn't let that put people off of doing that move, what would be deemed as late. Son's ownership is still low enough, like that he's considered the differential is just over 20%. And Spurs have good short-term fixtures, even if you're not captaining them. And then you can make the move back to the Liverpool player, say they play Man City and Man United, and then they play Everton on the Sunday, and you can move back on to a Liverpool player, which doesn't need to be Trent, could be Matip if you're trying to redistribute money. It could be Van Dijk, could be Robertson. So you've got all the options to pick back there if you've got the cash to move up there. I think Son's 10.8.
Yeah, for Spurs you'd have a 4 for 2. So Spurs go home to Newcastle, away to Villa, home to Brighton, away to Brentford. In the time that Liverpool away to Man City, home to United, I probably guess they would concede in both of those. I don't think it's the worst move. As you say, you can hop back, but you can
even if they didn't concede in both, the ceiling's lower against City and Man United. There's no guarantee of passing bonus or attacking returns for defenders as well.
And then you're up to Sunday, the 24th of April, then where the landscape might be massively different. The league could be won or not. There could be other injuries, other fires, or whatever else. So no, I think that'll be a popular move there. I kind of glad these are the things which, like, when you think of a move and you do a move and then you think about it after and say, why did I do that? I did think of these things. I gambled on him not be fit for Watford, which I think is a fair gamble. I did look at the other ones. Okay, I went for Kulusevski instead of Son because it's more for for budgetary reasons. I think if you bring in Son, you're probably not going to leave him in for the season because you can't afford Son, Kane, and Salah. Whereas I'd be quite happy to leave in Kulusevski. Playing on that right hand side, he's very similar to the way he's playing in terms of Son. Son, obviously got the goals. So that's the weekend's matches there. And then midweek, firstly the Monday, Palace and Arsenal. There will still be some Gallagher owners, but there's, we mentioned earlier, Saka, 64%, plenty on Ramsdale as well. And
again, the same I'd say the same about Saka as what I said about Son, is that I wouldn't let the fact that he hauled in his last game put you off and thinking that you're too late on going and getting him, because Arsenal have, again, good short-term fixtures. Yeah. They also got 2 fixtures in Sky Gameweek 36 as well. Yeah. If you don't run with the Sky fixtures, they're 3 ahead of the FPL fixtures if you want the quick. So for those that are more accustomed to kind of the planning of the chips on FPL, it's Gameweek 33 there, 36 in Sky. Arsenal play twice there, so again you could be moving on to Saka as part of a daisy chain move, and I definitely wouldn't say it's too late to be doing that.
I think that Saka, unlike Son personally, is probably if he continues to start and play as he has been, I can imagine being a season keeper personally because of his price point, because he holds that kind of 8 million-ish price point perfectly in midfield. You can just leave him there. He's going to do a good job. They've got loads of fixtures. They're playing well. Whereas obviously Son, as I say, very unlikely probably to keep Son all season, which is why why I went for Kulusevski there. And then Wednesday the 6th, we have the rearranged fixture between Burnley and Everton, and the reincarnation of Nicholas Pope.
Yeah, you've got to feel a little bit sorry for the Sa owners, I think, and not because of the way that points have been distributed and what's been collected and what's not before, but you've got to be unlucky with the rearrangement of the fixtures, because I imagine that most Sa owners would want to make the move to Pope, whereas the Ramsdale owners, it's much easier because Ramsdale plays the Monday night or doesn't play the Monday night if Leno's still in goals, and then move on to Pope midweek, whereas Sa owners have that very difficult decision to make provided they don't have coverage already or looking at alternative for that Wednesday game, Burnley versus Everton. But it's whether they take Sa out early for that game. I think there's a question.
There is a question. What are your early thoughts on that, Paul? If it was you, would you take him out?
Nah, I would just, assuming that your coverage for Newcastle versus Wolves is just Sa.
Yeah.
I would just.
You've got to stick with it.
Yeah, or if you were making a move, I certainly wouldn't be picking up someone from Wolves and Newcastle just to cover me off on the Friday game.
So you'd leave it. It's a tough leave, isn't it? It's one of those, again, I told you this, Paul, and you won't have it. You think it's a coincidence, but Nick Pope always bangs in an 11-pointer on a single game day.
He even got that dodgy man in the match in the 2-0 defeat from Leicester, didn't he?
He did. Whenever they're the ones on Sky Sports, Nick Pope knows the millions are just watching him and him alone, and he turns into Superman. He always does it, doesn't he? But yeah, it's a tough one because sod's law. You know what would happen, and these are things that drive you insane, right? Is that Burnley. You make the change up to Pope. Burnley concede. Pope gets like a 1 or 2 pointer, and then Sa puts in a mega performance on the Friday night for a 20 pointer, and you've used a transfer to kind of miss all that. It's really tough. I think you have to stick with the plan and just suck it up a little. The Dad Course says, "Evening guys, happy Mother's Day, and to you too." The Dad Course and Steve Cheek. If Ramsey and Saka are two of the midfield three for the season running, who is the third? What's it gonna Paul for that third midfield spot? Probably a Leicester player.
Yeah, so you're probably going to want Barnes or Maddison at some point.
Yeah,
I think.
Yeah, I agree.
Or Tielemans, I think. And then I'm dubious about this one, but after that blank game week, Sky game week 36. Villa have two double weeks and a fixture running all the way through as well. So there's an argument to go back to Coutinho, but that on the beach element is like they're probably going to have very little to play for. So do I want to go there for that reason? So maybe Coutinho could have that position as well.
Okay. And for Ramsdale owners and anyone else apart from Sa, bringing in Pope on Wednesday, a bit of a no-brainer against Everton?
I mean, I wouldn't. His ownership's going to be like 60%, I think. Again, I think
so, yeah.
Just going to bounce straight back up, I think.
Agree. It's going to be massive. Okay, Paul, we've got some probably very familiar logos now on screen from the various Sky podcasts. You just wanted to have a quick chat around what you take away from each of them. Yeah,
so now when I first started playing Sky about 10 years ago, there was Will's, the Hub's CEO, WordPress kind of diary on a weekly basis that he posted on Twitter. And you had Luke Williams, the godfather of Sky, did the odd article on Fantasy Football Scout. And that was really all there was from a content creator's perspective from Sky. Mark Edward, they started doing the podcast that Dan and I joined a couple of times. And Ian Parron always posted his planner link onto Will's WordPress kind of comment section as well. But obviously we've moved on from there, and now there's kind of 8 or 9 podcasts. And I just wanted to, obviously I'm a content creator on this podcast, and I just want to share how I take information. Now, this isn't going to work for everybody. So I've got staples, I listen to 2 or 3 of those podcasts religiously every week, and then others just depending on my personal life and work life that week as well. I don't commute into work as often as I did before. That was always my time for podcast listening. So now I always used to listen more intently, and now I have it more background, and try. So I try and draw. I don't change the way that I play the game, as you don't criticize me for, but often comment on that. I'll probably never win the game based on my style, which I accept, and I'll almost take it as a compliment. So, but what I do is try and take tiny little snippets from, like, so I don't change my strategy, I don't change my plans per se in the way that I play, but I try and take snippets out of what people say and then try and build it into my own strategy. So I've got 4 or 5 examples of things that people have said that, one, I either want to learn from, or 2, I have taken that on board in a decision that I've made in this season as well. So first of all, on Planet FPL, I think that James is really good at picking out entry points. Now, I've always thought about this as well, and it's what I used Ian's planner for. Try and find what was old school 3-for-1s, now the daisy chain moves. Basically, you're making a move on a Sunday or a Monday because you're getting in on a player who has more fixtures in the short term over the player that you've got coming out. Or now, where I think about it more, and what James mentioned on one of his pods recently, is it wasn't to get in a player to captain, it was to get in a player to make a move of a transition of a team. So how do I get from my team of 3 or 4 8 million plus midfielders to go back to the premium defense 5-3-2, which I was looking to do? So whilst at the weekend, like popular moves, like Jacob Ramsey's ownership was already relatively, was quite high. I think it was in the 40s. But at the weekend, when people were making the Son move, which I appreciate reaped massive rewards straight off, when people were making moves to like the Newcastle player or Wolves player, I just freed up the money on James Ward-Prowse by moving into Ramsey, which is something that James had mentioned on the pod. And having that, then my team looks really set for the kind of running now. I've got my enabler in place in midfield. I've moved formation to get to the, sorry, I've not moved formation because it was Ward-Prowse that I moved to there. I had considered moving a defender there as well, which is another strategy as well, because you could move your midfielder slot back to your defender with your next one. So that was something that I had taken from him and has proved very, very useful in point. On Scout, I know that Niall was looking at when the Chelsea lineup came out the other week, and everyone was set on moving to Rudiger.
On Thursday night,
there was a bit of mass hysteria, what to do now, and a lot of people made the Thiago Silva move. But Niall had talked about looking for a player that had a really high ceiling, that's someone that you would potentially want to have your team long term. And Havertz had kind of nailed down that slot in the Chelsea team. That he's played much more games than what he was playing before. He's getting rotated much less. That's not the kind of move that I would traditionally make. But I think in the run into the end of the season, it's something that I would definitely be more open to now. So you're not taking a punt on a differential for differential's sake. You're picking a high profile player from one of the best teams in the league who had 2 really good fixtures where you could captain that player in both games. And there was a high chance that he would start both. You got to see the lineup in the second game. So if you wanted to pick a different captain, you didn't want to punt on him there. And it worked out really, really well. And I can't remember if Luke made the move as well. But that's kind of something that I've taken from that, and perhaps as a way that I can tune the way that I play the game in the future.
I think
it's not something.
Sorry, no, I was just going to say. I think with that kind of move there as well, it was a bit no lose, because I left it because I didn't think that Silva would start on the Thursday. So for those kind of moves, this is why I kind of brought in Chris Wood. I'm not comparing Kai Havertz to Chris Wood, but it's almost like a no lose move. It's like it's what we try and say in fantasy football about putting yourself in a position to potentially do really well without screwing yourself over. And I think that's a really good example of that Havertz move. If it had have flopped, it wouldn't have massively mattered. But as it is, because it did well, you absolutely flew up. I think that's the opportunities we talk about time and time, aren't we? I think it's a really good example of that, and it was excellent move.
And my last example is a concatenation of a piece of advice that you've given me, that Ian Parron's given, and what Dan's given. All 3 different bits of advice that made me come to the same conclusion. So So last Thursday I was out walking my dog in the pitch dark, and he's away chasing squirrels, and I'm already getting nervous that I can't see him from that far away. And the Newcastle Everton lineups come out, and I had planned in my head to move on to St Maximin. I thought,
Yeah, it was the same.
I thought that with them needing a bit of spark in the team, that I thought that he would come back in. So I'm sat looking at the team, and I was taking Ward-Prowse out anyway. I eventually did it for Ramsey, but I'm thinking, could I move it on to Fraser? Could I move it on to Bruno Guimaraes? And one person that a lot of people weren't talking about that I'd also considered moving on to was Anthony Gordon from Everton as well. And I started, there's somebody does a good thread on this on FPL, and they talk about the decision making to make a transfer. It needs to tick so many of these boxes. It was kind of similar to that, but three things ran through my head at that time when I was making a decision. So Ian Parran, brilliant at fixture planning, but the best bit of advice that Ian Parran said to me before was pick attacking players from attacking teams and pick defensive players from defensive teams. So always stuck with me. So I thought to myself, what category does Newcastle and Everton come into? And for me, they come in neither.
Yeah.
So that was one thing that I ticked off. You said on a pod a couple of pods ago, if you're bringing in a player now, with the limited transfers that you've got left, consider the fact that you might need to hold them till the end of the season, and that the majority of your transfers, not all your transfers, the majority of your transfers should be used on players that you're happy to hold in your team for the rest of the season. So if I brought in one, I couldn't bring in Chris Wood, so I'm not digging you out. But on those three players I considered, would I want to hold them to the end of the season? And the answer was no. And then the third one was potentially a throwaway comment, like for a laugh from Dan, but genuinely is something that that stuck with me. And I've talked a bit about psychological moves in the past and risk adverse, whether what's your remorse factor when you've made a move, whether you're happy with it or you're not happy with it. And Dan had said, I can't remember if he said it in this international break or one previously, but so this might not be verbatim, but it was something along the lines of, right, you could bring in a Newcastle player, but then you're going to have to sit and look at the Newcastle player for 2 weeks over the international break. And I thought to myself, I don't want to sit and look at a Newcastle player for 2 weeks over the international break. And genuinely, I took those three bits of advice on where I was maybe on a 50-50 decision on whether I was going to do it. I had Kilman, and I already had doubts about whether he was going to start on that Newcastle game after the international break. So I was factored in kind of some of the things that you had done for the Wood move. But I just took those three in, and that veered me to not making a move, and obviously it worked out well by not doing anything.
I think the thing is as well, in terms of if I was in your position, I probably wouldn't have done the Wood move. If I was happy to consolidate my position, I was trying to climb a little bit. So it's again, I think both of us made the right move for the positions we were in. If you're looking to consolidate, which you are, you just leave it because you know that no one's going to be highly owned. Say that transfer later on. I'm trying to make a bit of a gain. Obviously, it hasn't happened yet. May do, before he leaves my team. But kind of either way, there, even if he doesn't, I had a 3-for-1 for him over. Can't think who I took him out now for, but either way, I still think it was the right choice. And
yeah. So I just think there's always these golden nuggets that come out in all the podcasts. Everyone dedicates their time, puts their time in the podcast, and thinks about the content, prepares what they're going to what they're going to talk about on the podcast as well. And for me, just taking small bits here and there, that's maybe even like a side comment, like a side 15-second point on a larger point, and they talk about that. It's taking little bits like that and then building into the strategy and the way that I like to play the game anyway. And I know that my style is not for everyone. Like, people want to enjoy it, fantasy football, and you might get more of a thrill by picking more differentials, and perhaps I do as well. Which is, and I'm not telling anyone how to play the game. That's obviously fine. But that's what I take from other pods as well, and hopefully that was useful.
Superb, Paul. Thanks for sharing. Just so everyone knows who's listening on the podcast version, with the 9 pods we've got up on screen, FPL advice by Bebop FC, who is an absolutely fantastic Sky player too, multiple great finishes. The season keepers, the Sky Sports Fantasy podcast by Mark Edworthy, Fantasy Football Scout with Luke and Niall, the Man On podcast, Planet FPL, Fantasy Football Face Off, Sky Bite Size with Dan Cox, and Golden Goal. So they're the 9. Apologies if I have missed any off. We did have a good old search, but those 9 and ours seem to be the 10 I could find that helps. So there's, if you are looking for more Sky content, there is plenty of really fantastic stuff out there. Okay, let's have a look at some questions. We had loads in. Thank you so much for everyone asking these. Firstly, Ian Parrin, with a quarter of the season still to be played, are you expecting your final Sky FF scores to be in line with this ratio, better or worse? So, Paul, for you, current 2762 would be a target of 3653, and myself 2717 equates to 3594. Paul, what do you think about that?
Yeah, basically we're going to continue on with the points per the points per game week trajectory on what we're currently going on. When I first read the question, I thought I would perhaps expect more, because I think there's going to be a few more single game days coming up. But then I've always said, I probably should get stats to back this up, but I always think that when a player gets a minor to kind of middling injury with kind of 3 or 4 weeks of the season to go, that more often than not they get ruled out for the season.
Yeah, sure.
Have surgery earlier so that they can get a full pre-season and come back for the following season. I just it's maybe just an easy narrative that I've picked up, that this player's out for the season now, and therefore thinking that when transfers start dwindling and situations like that can happen, maybe that'll tone it back down again. So yeah, I think roughly what's the ratio? Continue on.
I think it'd be a bit less, because I think, even now, we're exactly a quarter of the season left. The average transfers is exactly a quarter, which I think is absolutely remarkable, by the way, that, it's still that high in the top 1,000. But I do think there's still a lot of rearranged fixtures. Teams like Burnley and a couple of others have still got 11 games. They've got a third of the season left. People are trying to make moves now to kind of catch up and stuff. So I personally think that, a lot of teams will kind of run out of gas in terms of transfers and end up having to make hygiene only moves instead of forward thinking, proactive, aggressive moves. I think it'll be, if you haven't got Rudiger, for example, you'll very likely be bringing in Rudiger. If you haven't got, if you move off Trent, you'll very likely be bringing back a Liverpool defender and all this sort of stuff. So I think we'll find a lot of hygiene moves and not as many kind of, aggressive, I'm going to go for some rant, like Havertz example. We just won't have the luxury of going for those moves. So I personally think it'll end up a little bit less. But as I say, I see in the league, Ian is right up our backside, Paul, with plenty of transfers in hand. It's going to be an interesting finish there. But yeah, I personally think that we will fall off a little bit, but it's hard to say. Obviously, it
all takes one captain hat trick.
It does. You're right.
Kane or Salah.
I was just about to say, in terms of your season, how lucky do you think you've been this season, or unlucky? If you had to kind of rate it as a percent or rate it out of 10 or whatever, in terms of luck, what do you think so far?
Interesting question. I've not thought about it too much. I think I carried a bit of luck at the start of the season. This has been a strange season in that those that got a good start have been harder to catch this season than they have been in any other season that I've played Sky. And I had some luck with my kind of 8 million midfield ones. Like I talk about, like the peaks and troughs at the 8 million midfielder. So yeah, but then I have just played pretty standard in my opinion as well. So maybe like 5 luck. Like I've been. I think I'll take that back. I think I've been a bit lucky with injuries. I didn't get any of the big injuries at the start of the season, and I think that's where I've done well. So maybe a six or a 7.
I would
Luck.
have said about a 7 as well. I think in
Yeah.
Sky it differs across games. I definitely haven't had any luck in FPL this season, but in Sky, I think I can't remember a time where I've been, uber frustrated, kind of, uber. Oh, I can't believe how unlucky I am in Sky. Where you do get that in some other games, don't you?
There was people picking up, like you know that those players that are around 20% owned. There was like injury after injury after injury.
It was.
I know some people that
Liam won it, had
could
like 4 on the bounce or something. Yeah. And that's just hard. Like, you can't do anything about that, right? You've fall on the right side of the 50-50s there, because they were all obviously, very legitimate, really good picks. Yeah, I completely agree.
Yep.
Dave Simple Goal asks, is it pointless to only have one defender from Man City, Liverpool and Chelsea due to ownership elsewhere? Interesting question. This obviously Dave is still fighting for the title.
Well, it should, like, if the average is 1, it's all about how you use the players elsewhere. Then I think. So I wouldn't say it's pointless. No, like Dave's doing really well. He's in the top 10 still, right? He might even be in the top 5 still. So holding rank in certain games and then making the moves in other games on the game week isn't necessarily a bad thing. But then doubling or trebling up on one of those teams only.
Yeah.
I don't think that. This goes back to kind of how I think I want to use my transfers for the rest of the season. So say I've got Rudiger and say the premium back fives: Van Dijk, Trent, Rudiger, Laporte, and Cancelo. Say, like, you could make an argument for 5 of 10, but we'll say those 5 just now. If you sat with like one from each of them and then rotated the other 2 spots to treble up on a team, and then move, so say Man City played 3 times between Chelsea, like bookending the moves, and then you move on to 2 Chelsea premiums for the 3 games, and then perhaps Chelsea get a 2 for nothing over Liverpool. So then moving those 2 moves on to the 2 Chelsea players, and then moving them on to the 2 Liverpool players. So you're getting a treble up on each of them, like moving along like that, but keeping one placeholder in each of the teams at all points. You're still going to make advances there. So I don't think it's meaningless to have one, as long as you're using the transfers and the rest of the structure of your team to kind of gain extra fixtures that way.
Yeah, I completely agree. And part of the way I play the various games in Dream Team, Telegraph, and in Sky is to be in a kind of constant state of a pivot, I like to call it, in terms of having the one each. For me, I generally always have the one each, so I can quickly move off and quickly move on. Whereas it's very hard if you've got 3 Man City to go from 3 Man City to 3 Liverpool is 3 transfers. Whereas if you're in this constant state of pivot, you can just move quickly to you can use 1 or maybe 2 and completely transform your team, as you say. So I think having 3 is personally optimal. As you say, you're absolutely right. It's what you do with the rest of them then, and how you pivot and transition your team from phase to phase of the game, from week to week of the game. Yeah, I completely agree there.
And it might be the pivot. It might be the pivot points is having Matip instead of Trent as the Liverpool pivot, because that frees up the extra money to get your Ruben Diaz and your Laporte to sit with Cancelo to then move them on as well.
We've answered Gordon's question around the Sarr one. So Paul thinks don't get in any Burnley coverage or Everton for that game, maybe, Paul, or
if you're
unless you've got loads of transfers, maybe.
I would say if you were going to do it anyway, and you want Pope longer term, then by all means do it. Pope's ownership is going to be it's going to be higher than what Sarr's ownership is going to be. But I wouldn't try and then recover yourself in the Wolves Newcastle game if I was doing that, I think.
That's fair. Julian Wardle has asked about premium defence, again asking about Man City, Liverpool and Chelsea, maybe Arsenal. So I think we've answered that one. He says he wants to return to 5-3-2, but unsure exactly who and how many to target. I do think that...
Find a good... If you don't own Ramsey, find a good opportunity to bring in Ramsey or Norgard or somebody that's going to enable you, free up the money to be able to do that. And then your next transfer could be a midfielder. Like you could be on 4-4-2 at that point, and your next transfer could be a midfielder back to the defender.
I would look at the fixture runs though, because Liverpool now, for example, haven't got many games short term. If Trent misses Watford, just as an example, their only game for 2 weeks is against City, and then they got United. Whereas there are other teams who, other premium teams who have more fixtures and better fixtures as well. So it's, as you say, it's kind of hopping along those premium ones, aren't they? But they're all, there's the obvious ones, right? They may sound boring, but Trent, Cancelo, Van Dijk, Laporte, potentially Gabriel, Thiago Silva.
There's a base of like 10, 12. Yeah.
And but it may seem boring to go with them, but there's nothing boring of when they're knocking in 10 points every week, and this is.
I got quite a high jump. I got quite a high jump just by owning Cancelo and Laporte when City played Crystal Palace the other week.
John Burt says he's 27th overall, miles ahead in his work league, 8 transfers left, players in place for teams, lots of games to play. What should be my realistic ambition for the final part of the season? He's in quite an enviable place there in terms of if you're miles ahead in your work, as in miles, if you mean like a couple of 100 points, I just go for it. I think there's very few times where you'll be in this position.
Yeah,
I personally would.
I absolutely agree with you, and I think that even by having kind of 2 or 3 out your 8 transfers, if you say 2 or 3 of them are for explosive differentials, but with pedigree that you'd be willing to captain in certain games, then go for it. This isn't directly what the question's asking, but it was something that I was thinking about. Like since the overhaul, people's talked about not being able to climb positions, and it's been a bit stagnant and stuff like that. In that position there, John's got under the average transfers left. The top 100 is littered with really, really good Sky managers. I would argue that everyone in the top 100 has to have a decent level of engagement now to be in the top 100. There might be someone that's near in the bottom that was once flying high and used all their transfers and they're sinking down. But I've got to say, like, over 90% has got to be really engaged managers. And if you're sitting under the average transfer count, there's nothing to, like, yes, have ambitions to go up. I think realistically from that position, you could maybe make an outside push for top 10. I think top 20 would be a reasonable target. But if you've got less than the average and you've got good managers behind you, that's going to have a plan that even holding rank in that position come the end of the season might be a good outcome, because
you're not going to win organically, are you, by just kind of playing the template. You have to try and just have to be different, and and take the consequence on the chin. But it sounds like he's in a very enviable spot, as I say, that he's won his league anyway. So it doesn't matter if he finishes 500th, say, he can still go for it, which he won't because his team is set up nicely anyway. But you could go for your, I don't know, let's just say you see a starting lineup and you go for like a Mahrez or something, and he bangs in 2 goals and gets man of the match. Things like that can really, really make a difference, can't they? But you
at some point you're going to have to, you'd have to go against the grain.
Exactly.
You'd have to not captain Salah in a Liverpool fixture.
Even for Mane, ahead of Salah, who's to say that Mane doesn't get the goals? Gets him that day, right? It's all on the day.
Tom Powell, he was he tweets quite a lot, and he does some threads as well. He was top of Sky for a while. I think he brought in Son and captain Son over Kane, whilst holding Kane as well. So sure. I like the ambition. I know he doesn't have many transfers left, but his ambition is to win the game, and then therefore, you're going to have to make a move like that at some point.
Definitely. Davlar asks, how many transfers is the ideal amount, would you say?
I'd say like 10, 11, maybe something like that. I think any more than that, it feels like you should have perhaps used them by now to make gains when things were a bit stagnant. Any less than that, there might come a point in time soon where you wish you'd kept one or two back. I've got that feeling that there's going to be a few surprises, a few big injuries. I'm not predicting injuries, but I just feel that there's going to be a twist in the game.
I think
still to come.
I think with the strategy you mentioned earlier, which I think is a really, really good strategy of kind of hopping between premium defenses. I think if you have got 15 or 16, I think you could literally do it in twos almost, couldn't you? I don't think you could do that with 10 left. I don't. You still have to have transfers back to cover captaincy days, etc. Move on injuries. But I think if you did have 15 or 16, you could probably spend kind of 8 or 10 of those doing this hop on. Triple Man City, triple Liverpool, triple Chelsea, triple Liverpool. Whereas, yeah, I think if you're using that strategy, and this is why, we always say, and Paul, it's your biggest thing, and Ian's obviously about holding transfers back, because those who haven't held them back will be found out in this next month, right? And they will drop like a stone in terms of rank. So.
Especially if there's a few big injuries for the highly owned players.
What you find is, speaking from experience, even having 2 or 3 left with a month to play, and you think, oh, it's fine, I've got 1 a week. It's just you're just making hygiene moves, because someone will get injured. There will be a big captaincy day you have to cover, so you're only making the moves that everyone else is making, rather than actually, making aggressive moves that will help you climb rank.
I gave you an example earlier on the season of something that you couldn't predict, but if it came up, you would definitely do. So, my example was, if Brighton got back-to-back captaincy requirements, so say they played on a Monday night and then the Friday, which isn't beyond the realms of possibility, maybe unlikely, but if they played on a Monday night and they were playing someone like Everton, and they played on the Friday night and they were playing someone near the bottom of the league, or maybe like Southampton now, who aren't near the bottom of the league, but not like their players aren't that well owned anymore. Like moving on to someone like Dunk and then doing 2 captaincies out of Dunk, who is guaranteed passing in both of those games. So if you say on average, the outside chance of a clean sheet in those games, maybe picks up 6 points in both games. That's 6 plus 6, 12, 12 doubled, 24. And then you probably don't want to hold Dunk after that again. So that's 2 transfers, but you're banking 24 points out of it straight away. Yeah. Like, because he has that higher base level. Like, he's not the 2 point because he's almost guaranteed passing, that he starts on 5 points. And something like that will come up, I'm sure.
I'm sure as well. It's not going to happen yet, but in the next maybe month or 6 weeks, those who are only playing their first season, maybe the second season, they will hit a point with their transfers where they're desperate to make this transfer, which is like to be like a 4-for-1 or something crazy like that. And we said it back at the time. Remember, we were saying when we were considering transfers for getting a bloody Norwich player in for the cap, and it's like it will be more beneficial later on in the season, and it's going to be really interesting.
It was Norwich versus Watford, remember?
Yeah,
and Norwich beat them 3-0.
I would say it's going to be really interesting to look though at that point in the season and look at how beneficial or how obvious these 4-for-1s wherever it is actually are. If you're bringing in Laporte for a Man City 4-for-1 over Arsenal at the end, Laporte is probably is very likely going to get 25 points in the 3 games.
These are guaranteed points. Yeah, these are guaranteed
against going points for some absolute rotter from bloody Weghorst, for example. I'm using examples of where we've used a transfer earlier on where we would have almost definitely benefited more later, and it's going to be interesting to see those, isn't it? Last few questions are all around Liverpool. Tom Hartnell, thoughts on Matip and Alisson? I think they're almost too good to ignore. And David Martinez, if Trent's injured against Watford, is moving sideways to VVD and keeping Liverpool defensive coverage the most logical move, or do you guys see gains being made elsewhere? So Liverpool defence, Trent injury. What are you thinking at the moment, Paul?
Yeah, I know that you think that it's very likely that Man United and Man City will score against Liverpool. I maybe not as I think Liverpool's defended well. I maybe don't think it's as clean cut as that. But again, you don't get the necessarily the passing bonus doesn't come against them, and it's not as locked. I definitely think Matip's a good shout to hold and sort of pivot. I think that he might be somebody that I would pick up on the Everton game
same.
if he plays in that game instead of moving there. Who do I guess? Do I think Alisson will be the best scoring keeper to the end of the season? Quite possibly, but then I'm never ever going to captain him in captaincy days for Liverpool. And then if you start factoring in Pope's captaincy days, he's already got 2 that we know about, and potentially more after that. When you double up all of those Pope points, do I think that Pope potentially scores more than Alisson? Yeah, quite possibly. And therefore, it doesn't make it as clean cut for me that Alisson would be the better choice over Pope.
Yeah.
I know it sounds crazy saying, but those single captaincy days do count.
I think as well, we mentioned earlier, like Spurs have got a 4-2 over Liverpool in that in that period as well, where Liverpool play Man City and Man United. Man United have got a 5-2 if Trent doesn't play, which includes Leicester, Everton, Norwich. Then they got Liverpool and Arsenal. That's a 5-2 there. There's another few teams. Leicester would have 5 games as well. Arsenal would have 5 games before this Liverpool-Everton game we're talking about on the 23rd of April. So I would personally, I'd look elsewhere, to be honest, in that period. And then, as you say, maybe at that time, hop back on someone.
Or look for, to go back to the advice that you gave at a previous pod, look for somebody that you would perhaps want to hold till the end of the season that you don't already have, and then move somebody else back onto the Liverpool defender.
Saka, for example. Game. Someone like Saka is
And then you move out Ward-Prowse for your Liverpool defender or whoever.
Good stuff. Fantastic. Thank you, Paul, for all your help on those. And thank you, as always, for everyone for all the fantastic questions we have had in. Just got my rabble now on screen. It's in transition, I would say. But I've currently got Ramsdale in goals. Don't know if he's going to play or not. Have got Saka for the Monday night, but then, like I say, I'm very likely going to move on to Pope anyway on the Wednesday. I've got Laporte, Kilman, and Rudiger. So no Trent, no Cancelo. I've got 3 at the back at the moment because I moved Trent on to Kulusevski. I've got Coutinho, Saka, Rafinha, and Kulusevski in midfield, and then Salah, Kane, and Wood up front. So very much. Stop laughing, Paul. Stop laughing.
I'm just going back. I'm just going back to the fact that before we went live, you're like, so I'm going to do this move. Wait, now I've got 5 moves planned in the next 2 weeks.
I think I've got 10 transfers left. I think I've got 5 moves for, But I personally see now, after next weekend, I see 2 phases of the season left. I see this phase of where you can, like I say, jump on, Spurs and Leicester and, get all these extra games. And then there's like this final phase where you kind of settle in and, you settle in for the run-in. So, at the moment, I'm definitely doing Ramsdale to Pope. That's one. And I think I'm going to be doing Kilman, Rafinha, and Wood. Very roughly, this is now. I haven't exactly obviously got it all sorted, but it's going to very likely. I may have to bring in Ramsey potentially, and then probably bring Cancelo back at some point, and maybe go for another mid-price defender. I haven't worked out exactly right, but that's kind of roughly what my team will be. I think I'm not 100% sure yet.
This is this is the first time in a long time that my team looks completely different from yours. I think we had the same overhaul team as well, didn't we?
Rough, yeah. I think we were one off.
Yeah, I know.
Off, yeah.
I thought we had exactly the same team, and you moved Rafinha to Coutinho, and that's when it started.
Yeah. What's hurting me here is 2 or 3 of these transfers will be me bringing in players that you've already got. So I'll be bringing in Cancelo, probably Gabriel, or an Arsenal defender, and probably Ramsey, who you've already got very smug in situ. So I've just got to hope that, you know, Chris Wood in the meantime dominates Spurs and dominates Wolves. Give me a few points. No, it's all good, you know. So I'll probably use, you know, 3 or 4 transfers in these next 2 or 3 weeks, and then like I say, roughly around the end of April, like that Sunday the 24th. I'm just looking very, you know, holistically at the fixtures now, and there's a clear thing between Sunday the 10th and Sunday the 24th where certain teams have a lot of games, whereas a lot of the big teams haven't got a lot of games, if that makes sense. So I can see skipping to a few of those players and then skipping back, say on Sunday the 24th, for example, to, you know, to other teams. I haven't mentioned, I'll probably bring in a Leicester midfielder maybe as well, or something. Like I say, I haven't worked it all out exactly, but yeah, it's roughly what I'll be doing. And I've had to look at Chris Wood for 2 weeks. I got looking for another week as well now, all the way till Friday before he departs, before he bangs in a hat trick. So I won't mind that much if he does that. Top of the Hub £500 league, 10th place Simon Ingram, 9th Ashley Tongue, 8th Jack Smiley, 7th James Ingram, 6th Shane White, 5th Christopher Sharkey, 4th Daniel Thomas, 3rd Ryan West, 2nd Maurice Weeks, and top Liam Stevens, 2878, cruising at the top now. Second overall. He's 41 points clear in this league. Liam is having an absolutely great season, as is everyone on this table. So very, very well done to everyone there. And the Four Nations League, I've taken the Dragons' backside out of the picture. I might have to replace it soon with an English flag. Dan Cox's team is on 2688. Liam 2698. My second team 2703. Ian Parron's overtaken my second team now, 2707. He's only 10 points behind my first team. He's probably got at least double the amount of transfers I got left, roughly. I'm on 2717, and my brief foray into your underpants, Paul, didn't last very long. You are now, what is that? Can't work it out. Fifth, about 45 roughly points ahead of me, and I'll be bringing in your players, which hurts because
and I have more transfers than you know as well.
This is the same. I did a Green Arrow FPL pod a couple of weeks ago, and I wildcarded basically into Rich Clark's existing team, which again hurt. I wildcarded. I was like, right, Rich, what do you think of this team? And he went, that's my team, and I'm wildcarded in 31. That hurt as well. It's a similar thing happening here, but anyway, well done, Paul. And well done, everyone there. It's very likely Ian will very quickly overtake me. And that is it for us for this evening. As usual, thank you so much to all those watching live, to all those listening, to all those who are watching back. Your continued support, as usual, is much, much appreciated. Thank you so much, Paul, for all your insight and thoughts. Hope you have a fantastic time in Budapest and Vienna and wherever else you're going. Better than Bristol and Cardiff, which would have been your trip had Austria beaten Wales. That's right. Where can people find you, Paul?
On Twitter at Paul McAnulty 1 MCANULTY.
And my Twitter handle is at FFH_Fergi. So this podcast and video will be on the Fantasy Football Hub, Sky and TFF YouTube channel, and also available on all major podcast platforms. If you liked what you watched, please press the like button and remember to subscribe in the bottom right hand corner of the screen. And if you enjoyed your listen, please rate the podcast versions and leave a comment. Our handles on Twitter, Instagram and TikTok are at FFH_HQ, and our podcast Twitter handle is at FFH_Sky. So please follow and feel free to ask us any questions. Our website is fantasyfootballhub.co.uk, where you'll find everything you need for fantasy football all under one roof, including player comparison tools, the fixture ticker, Opta-stats, top player team reveals, and much, much more. We will be back early next week, looking ahead to Game Week 35. The best of luck for this week. Stay safe and goodbye for now.